My husband's controlling mother tried to ruin our wedding, but my maid of honor exposed her secret. My stomach churned with a mixture of excitement and dread as the wedding day approached. Excitement, because I was marrying Liam, the man I loved more than anything. Dread, because of his mother, Eleanor. From the moment Liam and I got engaged, Eleanor had made it her mission to turn our wedding into her own personal production, a grand showcase of her impeccable taste and social standing. Rather than a celebration of our love, tea started subtly enough. We'd chosen a charming, rustic barn venue, a place that felt intimate and reflected our personalities. Eleanor, however, immediately dismissed it as too provincial and lacking the necessary grandeur for a proper celebration. She began sending us brochures for opulent ballrooms and country club estates, each one more extravagant and less us than the last. Liam, bless his heart, tried to gently push back, explaining that we had a vision, a budget, and a desire for something more personal. Eleanor would simply smile tightly and say, "Darling, you'll thank me later. This is what people expect." The guest list was another battlefield. We had a modest list of close friends and family, but Eleanor, without consulting us, began adding her entire social circle, distant cousins, business associates, the woman who did her hair, the man who walked her dog. When we confronted her, she feigned innocence. "Oh, did I forget to mention? I just thought they'd be so thrilled for you too. And frankly, dear, a larger guest list simply looks better." It was less about celebrating with people who loved us and more about filling seats to create an impressive spectacle. Then came the dress. I had fallen in love with a beautiful, flowing A-line gown, simple yet elegant, and most importantly, it felt like me. I was so excited to show it to Liam's mother and my mother. My mother teared up, declaring it perfect. Eleanor, however, pursed her lips. "It's sweet," she said, as if describing a child's drawing. "But for a woman marrying into our family, something with a bit more presence, perhaps? Something with more lace, more sparkle, more couture." She then pulled out her phone and began scrolling through pictures of ridiculously expensive, elaborate gowns, all of which looked like they belonged on a runway, not at our barn wedding. I felt my spirit deflate a little. I had to stand firm. This was my dress. After a tense discussion, with Liam firmly on my side, Eleanor reluctantly conceded, but not before making a snide remark about how some people just don't understand true elegance. The catering was next. We had chosen a fantastic local farm-to-table caterer, known for their delicious, fresh food and commitment to sustainable practices. Eleanor scoffed. "Farm-to-table? Darling, this is a wedding, not a farmer's market. We need proper silver service, a carving station, and a dessert spread that will impress." She then, again without our permission, contacted a high-end catering company she frequented for her own lavish parties. When we found out, Liam had a serious talk with her, reiterating that this was our wedding, and we were making the decisions. Eleanor, for once, seemed to back down, but I knew it was only a temporary truce. The wedding planning became a constant exercise in defending our choices against Eleanor's relentless attempts to override them. Every decision, no matter how small, was scrutinized and criticized. The flowers were too simple, the music choices were unrefined, even the invitations, which we had carefully designed ourselves, were deemed lacking a certain sophistication. Liam was incredibly supportive throughout all of this. He would calmly but firmly tell his mother that we appreciated her input but that the final decisions were ours. But even he was starting to look worn down by her constant interference. My maid of honor, Sarah, was a godsend. She was my rock, my confidant, and my shield against Eleanor's onslaught. Sarah had witnessed Eleanor's behavior firsthand, from the passive-aggressive comments to the outright attempts to sabotage our plans. She had a keen eye for Eleanor's manipulative tactics and a fierce protectiveness of me. Sarah was also an incredibly organized and detail-oriented person, which was invaluable when trying to keep track of all the wedding details amidst the chaos Eleanor created. As the wedding day drew closer, Eleanor's antics escalated. She started calling vendors directly, attempting to change orders or add things without our knowledge. Our wedding planner, a sweet and patient woman named Maria, became increasingly exasperated. She called the florist and tried to change the entire color scheme. Maria confided in me one afternoon, her voice a mixture of disbelief and frustration, and she tried to add a champagne fountain that wasn't approved. I had to explain to her, very politely, that all changes need to come through you and Liam. The week of the wedding was a whirlwind of last-minute preparations, and Eleanor was everywhere, a buzzing, critical presence. She micromanaged the seating chart, complained about the placement of the decorations, and even tried to instruct the photographers on what angles to use. I was so exhausted and stressed that I found myself snapping at Liam, something I rarely did. He understood, of course, but the tension was palpable. The day before the wedding, we had the rehearsal dinner. It was supposed to be a relaxed, intimate gathering, but Eleanor, predictably, had managed to turn it into another grand affair. She had insisted on inviting even more people, had changed the menu at the restaurant, and was now holding court at the head of a long table, regaling her guests with exaggerated tales of her own wedding and offering unsolicited advice to Liam and me. I tried to just smile and nod, but inside, I was seething. During the rehearsal, Eleanor had been particularly disruptive. She kept interrupting Maria, the wedding planner, to offer her own suggestions for where people should stand, how they should walk, and even what they should say. At one point, she tried to physically move me to a different spot, claiming it would make for a better photo opportunity. I gently but firmly resisted, and she huffed, muttering something about my lack of understanding of visual aesthetics. Later that evening, after the dinner, Sarah pulled me aside. "Eleanor is getting out of control," she said, her voice low and serious. "I'm worried she's going to try something tomorrow. I have a bad feeling." I sighed, rubbing my temples. "I know, Sarah. I just want this day to be over so we can finally be married and she can go back to her own life." "No, I mean something more than just micromanaging," Sarah continued. "She's been talking to the DJ behind your back. I overheard her telling him to play a specific song for the first dance, a waltz, not your song. And she was also telling him to play an entirely different playlist for the reception, one that's completely different from what you and Liam picked out." My blood ran cold. Our first dance song was "Can't Help Falling in Love" by Elvis Presley, a song that held immense sentimental value for us. A waltz. Eleanor knew we weren't waltz people. This was a deliberate attempt to undermine our choices, to insert herself into one of the most intimate moments of our wedding. "Are you serious, Sarah?" I whispered, feeling a surge of anger. "Absolutely," she said, her eyes narrowed. "And that's not all. I also overheard her talking to the baker. She was trying to get them to add a completely different tier to your cake, a really gaudy, elaborate one that definitely wasn't part of your design." This was beyond simple interference. This was sabotage. Eleanor wasn't just trying to help or guide us. She was actively trying to rewrite our wedding to fit her own vision, regardless of our wishes. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and despair. I don't want to cause a huge scene on our wedding day, but I can't let her get away with this. Sarah thought for a moment. "I have an idea," she said, a mischievous glint in her eye. "But you're going to have to trust me." The next morning, the wedding day arrived, bright and clear. Despite the underlying tension, I felt a nervous excitement bubbling up inside me. This was it. I was finally marrying Liam. As I got ready with my bridesmaids, Sarah was uncharacteristically quiet, but I could see a determined glint in her eyes. She kept checking her phone, occasionally sending a quick text, and giving me reassuring smiles. Liam and I had made a pact. No matter what Eleanor did, we would focus on each other and our love. We would not let her ruin our special day. As I walked down the aisle, seeing Liam's emotional face, all my worries about Eleanor momentarily vanished. The ceremony was beautiful, heartfelt, and perfect. We exchanged our vows, sealed them with a kiss, and officially became husband and wife. The reception began with an atmosphere of joyful celebration. The barn, finally decorated to our taste, looked magical. The food from our chosen caterer was delicious, and the music, initially, was exactly what we had planned. Liam and I shared a magical first dance to "Can't Help Falling in Love," swaying gently in each other's arms, lost in the moment. I stole a glance at Eleanor, who was seated at the head table, a tight smile plastered on her face. She looked displeased, and a small part of me felt a flicker of satisfaction. After our first dance, the DJ announced that there would be a special dance dedicated to the parents of the groom. Eleanor beamed, clearly anticipating something she had orchestrated. The music started, and it was a slow, traditional waltz. Eleanor, with an air of theatrical grandeur, immediately rose and pulled Liam's father onto the dance floor, gliding gracefully, clearly reveling in the attention. Liam and I exchanged a look. This was definitely not something we had discussed or approved. Eleanor and Liam's father waltzed. Sarah discreetly approached the DJ booth. I watched her, a knot of apprehension forming in my stomach. What was she doing? She leaned in and spoke to the DJ, who nodded, a hint of amusement on his face. Then, Sarah handed him a small USB drive. Suddenly, the music changed. The elegant waltz abruptly cut out, replaced by a booming, almost comically dramatic track from a movie soundtrack. It was the kind of music you hear during a big reveal in a spy movie, full of tension and a sense of impending disclosure. Eleanor stumbled mid-waltz, her perfectly poised expression dissolving into confusion. The guests looked around, puzzled, murmuring to each other. Then, a slideshow began to play on the large projector screen that had been set up for our own carefully curated photos. But these weren't our photos. The first image that flashed onto the screen was a screenshot of an email. The subject line read, "Wedding music changes, urgent." The sender was Eleanor's email address. The recipient was the DJ's email address. The body of the email clearly instructed the DJ to play a waltz for the first dance and provided a completely different playlist for the reception, specifically stating, "The bride and groom have poor taste in music, so I've taken the liberty of selecting something more appropriate for guests of our caliber." A collective gasp went through the room. Eleanor's face, which had been confused moments before, now turned a ghastly shade of white. She looked like she had seen a ghost. The next slide showed a text message exchange between Eleanor and the baker. Eleanor was demanding a fabulous 6-tier gold leaf monstrosity be added to the cake, threatening to pull her considerable business from the bakery if they didn't comply, and even suggesting they charge us extra for it without our knowledge. The baker's polite but firm refusal was also visible. More slides followed, each one more damning than the last. There were screenshots of Eleanor's emails to the florist, trying to completely overhaul our flower arrangements. There were recordings of voicemails she had left for Maria, the wedding planner, berating her for not adhering to Eleanor's superior vision and threatening to get her fired. There was even a photo of Eleanor, clearly photoshopped, attempting to replace my face with her own in one of our engagement pictures. That last one elicited a ripple of nervous laughter, quickly followed by stunned silence. The grand finale was an audio recording. It was Eleanor's voice, clear and unmistakable, speaking to a friend on the phone. "Honestly, dear, I don't know what Liam sees in her. She's so common. I'm trying my best to elevate this whole affair, but she keeps insisting on these dreadful, tacky choices. I mean, a barn wedding? Really? I'm simply trying to save them from themselves, even if it means taking matters into my own hands. This wedding is my legacy, not theirs. It's an opportunity to show everyone what impeccable taste I have." The recording ended, and a stunned silence descended upon the room. The dramatic music faded out, replaced by an awkward hush. All eyes were on Eleanor, who stood frozen on the dance floor, her face a mask of horror and fury. Liam's father, who had been waltzing with her, slowly let go of her hand, his own face a mixture of shock and disgust. Liam squeezed my hand, his eyes wide. I could see the hurt in his eyes, the realization of the extent of his mother's manipulation. He looked at Eleanor, then back at me, a silent apology in his gaze. It was Sarah who finally broke the silence, stepping forward with a MIC in her hand, a triumphant smirk on her face. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice ringing through the quiet hall. "As maid of honor, it is my duty to ensure the bride and groom have the wedding of their dreams. Unfortunately, it seems someone had a slightly different dream in mind." She gestured pointedly at Eleanor. All of these communications were intercepted by our diligent wedding planner and a very observant maid of honor. We felt it was important to share the truth with everyone. Eleanor, finally finding her voice, let out a strangled cry. "This is an outrage. How dare you? This is a fabrication," she shrieked, her voice cracking with indignation. "You're ruining my son's wedding." "No, Eleanor," Liam said, his voice surprisingly calm but laced with steel. "You were trying to ruin our wedding. And you have been, for months. This is unforgivable." His words hit Eleanor like a physical blow. She looked utterly devastated, her carefully constructed facade crumbling around her. She tried to stammer out an excuse, but no words came. Then, to everyone's surprise, Liam's father stepped forward. "Eleanor," he said, his voice quiet but firm, "I think it's time for you to leave." Eleanor's mouth dropped open. "Arthur, how can you?" "I heard the recording, Eleanor," he interrupted, his eyes filled with a deep disappointment. "I've seen the emails. This is not about elevating anything. This is about control. and it's about disrespecting our son and his new wife. You have embarrassed yourself, and you have embarrassed our family. Please, just go." Tears streamed down Eleanor's face, smearing her carefully applied makeup. She looked around the room, her gaze darting from face to face, seeing only condemnation. With a choked sob, she turned and, without another word, hurried out of the barn, her departure marking the end of the public spectacle she had unknowingly created for herself. The remaining guests were still buzzing with shock and disbelief, but a sense of relief also settled over the room. My mother rushed over and hugged me tightly, whispering, "I am so proud of you both for standing up to her." Liam held my hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "I am so sorry, darling," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I had no idea it was this bad. Thank you, Sarah. Truly, you saved our wedding." Sarah just grinned, giving me a wink. "That's what maids of honor are for, right? Now, let's get this party back on track." And that's exactly what we did. The DJ, with a knowing smile, put our original playlist back on, and the party resumed with renewed energy. The awkwardness slowly dissipated, replaced by laughter and dancing. The rest of the night was truly magical, a celebration of love and resilience. In the days and weeks that followed, Eleanor made several attempts to contact Liam, sending him tearful apologies and trying to spin the narrative, but Liam stood firm. He told her that her actions were deeply hurtful and that she had betrayed our trust. He told her that he needed space, and that until she truly understood the gravity of what she had done, there could be no reconciliation. Liam's father, Arthur, also had a long, serious conversation with Eleanor. Something I later learned was a culmination of years of similar, albeit less public, manipulative behavior on her part. He eventually informed us that Eleanor had agreed to attend therapy, and that he himself was re-evaluating their relationship. Our wedding day, which had started with such anxiety, ended up being a powerful testament to our love and the strength of our chosen family. Sarah, my incredible maid of honor, became a legend amongst our friends. And as for Eleanor, her grand attempt to control our wedding ultimately backfired spectacularly, exposing her true colors and solidifying our commitment to each other, free from her toxic influence. It was a dramatic, unexpected twist, but one that ultimately allowed us to have the wedding we always dreamed of, untainted by her ego and manipulation. It was a clear demonstration that our love was strong enough to overcome even the most meddling of mothers.